My principal saw me taking the SATs, then ripped my test in half because I was dating his son. The proctor had just called time when Principal Hendricks walked into the testing room. I was capping my pencil, double-checking my answer sheet was properly bubbled, when I felt his presence before I saw him. That particular heaviness in the air that he carried everywhere, like storm clouds, had permanently attached themselves to his shoulders. Maya Torres. His voice cut through the shuffle of papers and relieved sighs. A word. Every head in the room turned. I'd been taking the SAT at Lincoln High on a Saturday morning in October, surrounded by 40 other juniors and seniors who now watched with varying degrees of curiosity and relief that they weren't the one being singled out. The proctor, Mrs. Chen from the district office, looked up from her collection box with confusion creasing her forehead. The test just ended, Mr. Hendricks. Students need to. I'm aware of the protocol. He was already moving toward my desk in the back corner. This won't take long. My hands had gone cold. I'd been dating his son, Tyler, for 7 months. We kept it relatively quiet at first because Tyler was a senior and I was a junior, and also because his father had a reputation for being impossible to please. But high school is high school, and by September everyone knew. Including Principal Hendricks, who had made exactly one comment about it in the hallway 3 weeks prior. I hope you know what you're getting into. I hadn't understood the warning then. I understood it now as he reached my desk and held out his hand. Your test materials. All of them. The proctor needs to collect. Now, Miss Torres. Mrs. Chen stood up. Mr. Hendricks, I'm the designated test administrator. All materials must be processed according to. He picked up my answer sheet. My completely filled, carefully bubbled, probably my best SAT attempt answer sheet. Then he took the test booklet. I watched his hands, large and deliberate, as they held my entire future. I witnessed cheating, he said it loudly enough for everyone to hear. Miss Torres was looking at another student's answers during the final section. The room went silent in that particular way that meant everyone had stopped breathing at once. That's not true. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I didn't look at anyone's test. I saw you glance to your right multiple times. My calculator was on the right side of my desk. I was doing math problems. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that made my stomach twist. Unfortunately, allegations of impropriety require immediate invalidation of test results. Then, while Mrs. Chen rushed toward him with her hands outstretched in protest, he tore my answer sheet in half. The sound was surprisingly quiet. Just a soft rip, barely audible, but it might as well have been thunder. No. Mrs. Chen grabbed for the pieces. You can't, that's a violation of. I'm the principal of this school, Mrs. Chen. I have authority over student conduct on school grounds. He dropped the torn halves on my desk like they were nothing. Like they weren't the culmination of months of prep, early mornings, practice tests, tutoring sessions I'd paid for with money from my weekend job at the grocery store. I stared at the jagged edges where my bubbled answers had been separated from each other. Question 43 split from 44. My essay response torn vertically down the middle. This is unprecedented, Mrs. Chen was saying, her voice climbing higher. I'll need to file a report with the district, with the college board, please do. Principal Hendricks turned to leave, then paused beside my desk. He spoke quietly enough that only I could hear. You should have thought about consequences before getting involved with my son. He left. Mrs. Chen was frantically dialing someone on her phone. The other students sat frozen, some with pity on their faces, others with the careful blankness of people who didn't want to get involved. I looked down at my torn test and felt something shift inside my chest. Not sadness. Not yet. Something harder and colder. I pulled out my phone and took photos of the torn sheets from multiple angles. Then I took a photo of the room number, the clock showing 12:47 p.m., Mrs. Chen on her phone looking distressed. I documented everything with the same methodical care I'd used to bubble in my answers. Maya. It was Jessica Park, who'd been sitting 2 rows ahead. She twisted around in her seat. I was watching you the whole time during the last section because I finished early and was bored. You never looked at anyone's test. I'll tell them. Me too. Christopher Adams, diagonal from me. That was complete garbage. Mrs. Chen lowered her phone. Maya, I'm so sorry. I'm calling the district supervisor right now, and I've already contacted the college board. This is absolutely not proper procedure. We'll fight this. But I was looking at my phone, at the photos I'd taken, and thinking about Tyler. Sweet, quiet Tyler who played piano and wanted to study music therapy and who told me 2 weeks ago that his father had started leaving college brochures for military academies on his desk even though Tyler had been accepted early decision to a conservatory. Tyler, who'd grown more anxious and withdrawn as his father's pressure intensified. Tyler, who I genuinely cared about until about 3 minutes ago when I realized his father had just destroyed my test because he didn't think I was good enough for his son. Or maybe because Tyler was finally standing up to him, and Principal Hendricks needed to reassert control somewhere. The cold thing in my chest crystallized into clarity. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to rage. I was going to think. "Mrs. Chen," I said quietly. "I need you to write down exactly what happened here, with the time and everything he said. Can you do that?" She nodded vigorously. "Absolutely. And I want you to know, in 20 years of proctoring, I have never seen anything like this." I gathered the torn pieces of my test, careful not to damage them further, and slid them into my bag. Then I walked out of that testing room with my head up and my phone full of evidence, and I started planning. Tyler called me that afternoon. "Maya, I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. My dad, he's been getting worse lately, and I think this is because of me, because I told him I'm definitely going to Oberlin no matter what he says, and, Tyler, did you know he was going to do this?" "What?" "No. I didn't even know he was at the school today. He told me he had a district meeting. He destroyed my SAT test." I know, and it's insane. I'm going to talk to him. I'll fix this." I almost laughed. "You can't fix this." "Then I don't know, I'll tell the district what he's really like. How he's been controlling everything about my life, how he threatened to cut me off financially if I didn't apply to West Point, Tyler." I made my voice gentle because it wasn't his fault, not really. "Don't do anything yet. Let me handle this my way." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to take the SAT again in December. And I'm going to make sure your father never does this to another student." There was a long pause. "Maya, be careful. When he gets like this, he doesn't back down. He doubles down." "Good," I said. "So will I." That evening I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and started researching. My mother was working the night shift at the hospital, she was a nurse, and we'd been making it work just the two of us since my father died when I was 12. She taught me to be practical, to document everything, to never assume people would be fair. Those lessons had seemed depressing when I was younger. Now they felt like armor. I found the official SAT complaint process on the College Board website. I found the district's procedure for reporting administrative misconduct. I found the contact information for the school board members. Then I found something more interesting, a local news article from 4 years ago about a lawsuit filed against the district by a former teacher who claimed Principal Hendricks had retaliated against her for reporting safety violations. The case had been settled quietly. No details. But it meant there was history. I started a document titled Timeline and began writing down everything. The date Tyler and I started dating. The date Principal Hendricks made his hallway comment. The date and time of the SAT. His exact words. Mrs. Chen's reaction. The names of witnesses. I wrote for 3 hours, stopping only to make myself a sandwich I barely tasted. Then I wrote emails. One to Mrs. Chen, asking for her written statement. One to Jessica and Christopher, asking if they'd be willing to provide witness statements. One to the College Board, filing a formal complaint with my photos attached. One to the district superintendent, ceasing every school board member whose email I could find. I didn't send them. Not yet. First, I needed to understand the full picture. Monday morning, I went to school early and requested a meeting with the guidance counselor, Mrs. Patterson. She was a thin woman in her 50s who always wore cardigans and had a framed poster in her office that said, "Be the reason someone smiles today." I'd never needed her before, but I needed her now. "Maya, come in." She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "I heard about the SAT incident. I'm so sorry that happened." "Thank you. I wanted to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Has Principal Hendricks ever done something like this before?" Mrs. Patterson's expression shifted, became more guarded. "I can't discuss other students' situations." "I'm not asking for names. I'm asking if there's a pattern." She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her weighing something internal. Finally, she said, "Maya, I think you should focus on your complaint through the proper channels. Don't go looking for trouble." "Trouble already found me, Mrs. Patterson. I'm just trying to understand if I'm the first or if there are others." "You're a smart girl. She leaned forward slightly. Smart enough to know that institutions protect themselves. And smart enough to know that sometimes the right thing to do is the hardest thing to do. It wasn't a confirmation, but it wasn't a denial either. I left her office with my suspicions strengthened. Principal Hendricks had done this before, or something like it. And the district had looked the other way. At lunch, I sat with my usual group: Jessica, Christopher, and a few others from the junior class. Tyler had texted me that morning asking if we could talk, but I told him I needed some space to process everything. It was partially true. Mostly, I didn't want him to accidentally tip off his father about what I was planning. I still can't believe he just ripped your test, Jessica said, shaking her head. Like some kind of movie villain. It was calculated, I said. He knew exactly what he was doing. Are you going to sue? Christopher asked. Because my dad's a lawyer, and he said what Hendricks did sounds actionable. Maybe eventually. Right now I'm gathering information. About what? About whether this is personal or whether it's a pattern. They exchanged glances. Then Jessica said slowly, "You know about Marcus Reeves, right?" I didn't. Tell me. He graduated 2 years ago. He was going to be valedictorian, had a full ride to Stanford lined up. Then, like a month before graduation, Hendricks accused him of plagiarizing his senior thesis. Marcus got suspended, lost his scholarship, the whole thing fell apart. My pulse quickened. Was it true? Did he plagiarize? Nobody thought so. His English teacher, Mr. Kowalski, even tried to defend him, said he'd watched Marcus write the whole thing. But Hendricks pushed it through anyway, and Marcus ended up graduating without honors and going to community college instead. Where's Marcus now? I think he's still in town. His little sister, Alicia, is a sophomore here. I found Alicia Reeves after school, waiting for the late bus. She was sitting on the bench outside the main entrance with headphones in, and when I approached, she looked up with immediate wariness. The defensive posture of someone who'd learned to expect trouble. Alicia? I'm Maya Torres. I was wondering if I could ask you about your brother. Her expression closed off completely. I don't talk about Marcus. I know this is random, and I'm sorry to bring up something painful. But Principal Hendricks destroyed my SAT test on Saturday, and I'm trying to figure out if he's done it before? Alicia pulled out her headphones. Yeah. He ruined my brother's life. Can I ask what happened? Your side of it? She studied me for a moment, then shrugged. Why not? Everyone else has already made up their minds anyway. She gestured to the space beside her on the bench, and I sat down. Marcus was the smartest person I knew, she said. He worked harder than anyone. Our parents both worked 2 jobs, so Marcus always took care of me, helped me with homework, made sure I had what I needed. And he was so close to getting out, you know. Stanford was his dream. What happened with the plagiarism accusation? It came out of nowhere. One day everything's fine, the next day Hendricks is calling my parents in for a meeting, saying Marcus copied his entire thesis from some online source. Except he didn't. Mr. Kowalski tried to explain that he'd been supervising the whole project, that Marcus had shown him drafts and research notes, but Hendricks said the evidence was clear. What evidence? Some website that supposedly had the same content. But when Marcus tried to prove the timeline, like, he'd been working on his thesis for months before that website was even created, Hendricks said the timestamps could be faked. There was no way to win. Did your brother have any connection to Hendricks? Any reason for him to single Marcus out? Alicia looked at me directly. Marcus was dating Sophie Chen at the time. The district supervisor's daughter. The pieces clicked into place with sudden, terrible clarity. Principal Hendricks had a pattern of targeting students who got involved with people he deemed inappropriate or threatening to whatever social order he decided mattered. Tyler's girlfriend. The district supervisor's daughter. Maybe others. Did Marcus ever fight back? File a complaint? He tried. My parents couldn't afford a lawyer, and the district backed Hendricks. They said their investigation supported his findings. Marcus got so depressed after that, he barely left the house for months. He's working at a warehouse now, taking online classes when he can afford them. He's still brilliant, but it's like something broke in him. I felt anger rising hot in my throat, but I pushed it down. Anger wouldn't help. Alicia, would your brother be willing to talk to me? To go on the record about what happened? She hesitated. I don't know. It took him a long time to move on, and bringing it all up again might. I'm going to stop him, I said quietly. I'm going to make sure Principal Hendricks can't do this to anyone else. But I need people who'll stand up and tell the truth about what he's done. Alicia gave me her brother's number. He's cautious. Don't expect him to just trust you right away. I understand. I called Marcus that evening. He was reluctant at first, his voice flat and careful. But when I told him what had happened to me, something shifted in his tone. He's still doing it, Marcus said. I don't know what I hoped. That maybe he'd gotten in trouble, that someone would have stopped him by now. Help me stop him now. How? By telling your story. I'm building a case, documenting everything. The more evidence of a pattern, the harder it is for the district to ignore. He was quiet for a long time. Then, what do you need? Over the next 2 weeks, I became an investigator. Marcus connected me with Sophie Chen, who was now at college in California but was willing to talk via video call. Sophie's story was similar. Principal Hendricks had accused Marcus of being a distraction, had implied that Sophie was wasting her potential, had made their lives miserable until they finally broke up under the pressure. My mom tried to intervene, Sophie told me, her face on my laptop screen late one evening. She called Hendricks, tried to talk to him professionally. He basically told her that if she pushed the issue, he'd make sure everyone knew her daughter was involved with a cheating scandal. Even though Marcus didn't cheat. Even though there was no scandal except the one he invented. Did your mom back down? She had to. She couldn't risk her position in the district. She felt terrible about it, still does. But Hendricks had all the power. I took detailed notes on everything. Then I started digging deeper into Principal Hendricks's history. Public records. School board meeting minutes. Budget reports. Anything I could access without breaking laws or crossing ethical lines that would undermine my credibility later. I found more interesting things. A pattern of teacher turnover in certain departments. Several settlement agreements between the district and former employees, all confidential, but their existence was public record. A couple of sanitized news articles about administrative restructuring that, when I read between the lines, suggested internal conflicts. Mrs. Chen provided her written statement, detailed and damning. Jessica and Christopher provided theirs. I compiled everything into a comprehensive document, organized chronologically, cross-referenced and annotated. It was 30 pages long by the time I finished. Then I retook the SAT in December. I'd registered for the next available date immediately after the October incident, and I'd studied harder than ever. Not just because I needed a good score for college, but because I needed to prove that Principal Hendricks hadn't broken me. That his petty revenge had failed. I scored a 1,520. Not perfect, but strong enough for anywhere I wanted to apply. Tyler and I had barely spoken during those weeks. He tried to reach out several times, but I'd kept him at arm's length. It wasn't that I blamed him, I didn't. But his father had used our relationship as a weapon, and I couldn't think about Tyler without thinking about that torn test, that public humiliation, the casual cruelty of someone who thought his power made him untouchable. Finally, Tyler showed up at my house on a Saturday afternoon in mid-December. My mother answered the door and called up the stairs for me. When I came down, Tyler was standing in our small living room looking exhausted and older than 18. "Can we talk?" he asked. We sat on the porch even though it was cold. Tyler wrapped his coat tighter around himself and said, "I'm sorry I haven't been more present. My dad, things have gotten worse at home. He found out I already paid my enrollment deposit for Oberlin, and he's been threatening to cut me off completely. Not just for college. He said I can't live at home anymore if I defy him like this. I'm sorry, Tyler. He's ruining everything." Tyler's voice cracked. He drove away my mom years ago, and now he's trying to control every single decision I make, and he's hurt you, and I don't know how to stop him. I wanted to comfort him. Part of me still cared about Tyler, maybe always would. But I also knew that we couldn't move forward, couldn't be together, while his father's shadow hung over everything. "Tyler, I need to tell you something. I've been building a case against your father. I'm going to file a formal complaint with the state education board, and I have evidence of a pattern of retaliation and abuse of power. It's going to get messy, and it might become public, and I wanted you to hear it from me first." He stared at me. "You're going after him?" He destroyed my test because he didn't like that we were dating. Before that, he ruined another student's life for the same reason. He's been abusing his position for years, and nobody stopped him because he's good at making it look justified. But I have witnesses now. I have documentation. I have proof. Maya, he'll fight back. He'll try to destroy you. Let him try. Tyler rubbed his face with both hands. I don't I know he's wrong. I know what he did to you is unforgivable. But he's still my father, and if you do this, if you go public with all of this, it's going to tear my family apart even more than it already is. Your family is already torn apart, Tyler. Your father did that, not me. I know. His voice was barely a whisper. I know you're right. I don't know if I can watch it happen. Then don't. You can step back from this. I won't blame you. He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. If you do this, we're done, aren't we? We can't come back from this. My throat tightened, but I nodded. Probably not. I love you, he said it simply, like a fact. I've never said that before because it scared me, but I do. And I hate that my father is the reason we can't be together. I care about you too, I said softly. But I can't let what he did go unanswered just to preserve our relationship. It's bigger than us now. Tyler left after that. I watched him walk down the street toward his car, his shoulders hunched against the winter wind, and I felt the loss of him like a physical ache. But I didn't call him back. The next Monday, I submitted my formal complaint to the State Education Board. I also sent copies to every school board member, the district superintendent, and several local news outlets. I included my 30-page documentation, all witness statements, photos of my torn test, and a cover letter explaining the pattern of retaliation I'd uncovered. Then I waited. The first response came from a school board member, Mrs. Linda Garrett, who called me personally. Ms. Torres, I've read your complaint, and I want you to know I'm taking this very seriously. I'd like to schedule a meeting with you and your mother to discuss the next steps. We met at a coffee shop, neutral territory. Mrs. Garrett was a black woman in her 60s who taught in the district for 30 years before retiring and joining the school board. She had reading glasses on a chain around her neck and a no-nonsense demeanor that reminded me of my mother. I've been concerned about Principal Hendricks for a while, she said once we were all seated. But concerns aren't evidence, and he's very good at covering his tracks. What you've compiled here is substantial. What happens now? My mother asked. She'd been supportive but worried ever since I'd told her what I was doing. Worried that I'd be retaliated against further, worried that the system would protect Hendricks instead of holding him accountable. Now I bring this to the full board. I'm also going to recommend we hire an independent investigator to look into the allegations. The state board will conduct their own review as well. This process might take months, and I want to be honest with you, it might not result in the outcome you're hoping for. But you've done everything right. You've documented, you've gathered witnesses, you've followed proper channels. That matters. Will Maya be protected? My mother pressed. He's already targeted her once. I'm going to personally ensure that Principal Hendricks has no direct authority over Maya's academic records or opportunities moving forward. And if there's any indication of further retaliation, we'll act immediately. The investigation took 4 months. During that time, several things happened. First, a local news outlet ran a story about the allegations. It was brief and carefully worded to avoid liability, but it was public. Local principal faces allegations of student retaliation, read the headline. The article mentioned my torn SAT test and noted that the State Education Board was investigating. Second, 2 more former students came forward with their own stories of Principal Hendricks's behavior. One was a girl who'd been removed from the Honor Society on dubious grounds after she challenged him on a school policy. Another was a student who'd been suspended for 3 days for insubordination after questioning why the principal's son had been given special accommodations others weren't allowed. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Third, Tyler moved out of his father's house and went to stay with his maternal grandmother in the next town over. He texted me once to let me know he was okay and to thank me for having the courage to do what I couldn't. I texted back telling him I hoped he was safe and that Oberlin was lucky to have him. We left it at that. Fourth, Principal Hendricks tried to discredit me. He gave a statement to the school board claiming I'd always been a problematic student, that my relationship with his son had been inappropriate from the start, that I'd threatened to ruin him when he'd expressed concerns about it. But his lies didn't hold up against the evidence. My academic record was thoughtless. Multiple teachers spoke on my behalf. And most importantly, the pattern of similar behavior with other students made it clear that this wasn't about one vindictive teenager with a grudge. In April, the State Education Board released their findings. They determined that Principal Hendricks had repeatedly exceeded his authority, engaged in retaliatory behavior against students, and created a hostile environment inconsistent with educational best practices. They recommended his immediate suspension pending a full disciplinary review. The school board voted 5-2 to accept the recommendation. Principal Hendricks was suspended without pay. 2 weeks later, he resigned. The school held a quiet administrative transition. The vice principal, Mr. Morrison, took over temporarily. He was younger, more approachable, and his first act was to send an email to all students and families apologizing for the challenges of the past several months and promising a renewed commitment to student welfare and transparent leadership. I didn't feel triumphant. Mostly I felt tired. But I also felt something else, a sense that I'd protected the students who would come after me. That the next junior who dated someone her principal disapproved of wouldn't have her test torn in half. That the next brilliant student who worked 3 times as hard as everyone else wouldn't have his future destroyed on fabricated charges. On the last day of junior year, Mrs. Patterson called me into her office. She gestured for me to sit, then surprised me by smiling. "I wanted to apologize," she said. "When you came to me back in October, I was too cautious. I should have been braver. You couldn't risk your job." "Maybe not. But you risked something too, and you were 17 years old. That took more courage than I showed." She slid a folder across the desk. "These are letters of recommendation from every teacher you asked. I've also written one. I think you'll find them adequate." I opened the folder and skimmed the first letter, from my English teacher. It began, "In 20 years of teaching, I have rarely encountered a student with Maya Torres's combination of integrity, determination, and moral courage. Thank you," I managed. "Where are you applying?" "Everywhere I was planning to before. Plus a few more reaches now that my SAT score is solid." I paused. "I'm thinking about studying education policy. Or maybe law. Something where I can make sure systems work the way they're supposed to." Mrs. Patterson nodded slowly. "You'll be excellent at that." I graduated the following year with honors. My mother cried during the ceremony, which was held on the football field on a warm June evening with the sunset turning everything golden. Tyler was there too, graduating with the senior class, heading to Oberlin in the fall. We didn't speak, but we nodded at each other across the crowd, a small acknowledgement of everything that had happened between us and because of us. Principal Hendricks didn't attend his son's graduation. I heard through the school gossip network that he'd taken a job in administration at a private school in another state. The kind of place where wealthy parents paid enough that accountability was more negotiable. It bothered me that he'd landed on his feet, but I also knew his reputation had taken permanent damage. A simple internet search of his name now brought up articles about the investigation that would follow him. I got into 7 of the 9 colleges I applied to. I chose a small liberal arts school with a strong pre-law program and a full financial aid package. My mother helped me move into my dorm in August, and on her way out, she hugged me tight and said, "Your father would be so proud of who you've become." I think about that whole year sometimes. Not with anger anymore, but with a kind of clarity. I learned that power unchecked will always abuse itself, and that silence in the face of injustice becomes complicity. I learned that documentation matters, that patterns matter, that one person speaking up can give others the courage to do the same. I also learned that standing up for yourself costs something. It cost me my relationship with Tyler, even though neither of us wanted that. It cost me months of stress and work on top of my regular schoolwork. It cost me the naive belief that adults in positions of authority would naturally do the right thing. But it gave me something too. It gave me the knowledge that I could face down someone with institutional power and win, not through luck or connections, but through persistence and evidence and refusing to accept that his version of events was the only one that mattered. It gave me a sense of purpose. And it gave other students a safer environment, even if they'd never know my name or what I'd done. Marcus Reeves applied to transfer to a 4-year university that fall. He got in with a scholarship. Sophie Chen sent me a Facebook message saying her younger sister, now a freshman at our high school, felt safer knowing Hendricks was gone. Alicia Reeves told me in passing at a gas station that summer that she'd joined the student government, something she'd been too intimidated to do before. Small ripples. But ripples that mattered. Update 1, 3 years later. I'm sitting in a cafe near my college campus, supposed to be studying for finals, but instead I'm writing this update because something happened yesterday that I need to process. I'm a junior now at Hartwell College, majoring in political science with a minor in education policy. I've spent the last 3 years learning about institutional reform, accountability systems, and the ways power structures in education either serve or fail students. I've interned with a nonprofit that advocates for student rights. I've become involved in campus governance. And honestly, I'd almost moved past what happened with Principal Hendricks, not forgotten, but incorporated it into who I am rather than letting it define me. Then yesterday I got an email. The subject line read, former Lincoln High student seeking to connect. The sender was someone named David Ochoa, and his message was brief. Hi Maya, you don't know me, but I was a sophomore when you were a junior at Lincoln. I watched what you did with the Principal Hendricks situation, and it always stuck with me. I'm reaching out because I'm dealing with something similar at my college, and I was wondering if you'd be willing to talk about how you navigated everything. I understand if you'd rather not revisit it. Either way, thank you for what you did. It mattered more than you probably realize. I stared at that email for a long time. Then I called him. David picked up on the second ring. His voice was quiet, careful. Thanks for calling. I honestly didn't think you would. Tell me what's happening. He explained that he was a sophomore at a state university a few hours from here. One of his professors, a tenured faculty member in the engineering department, had failed him on a major project. Not because the work was bad, David had documentation showing his project met all the criteria, but because David had filed a complaint with the dean about the professor's tendency to make inappropriate comments about female students in class. It's retaliation, obviously, David said. But he's being really clever about it. He's framing it as academic judgment, saying my work didn't demonstrate sufficient understanding of the material. And because he's been there for 20 years and I'm just a sophomore, nobody wants to believe a professor would be that petty. But you have proof? Documentation? I have my project files with timestamps, showing I met every requirement. I have the rubric he provided at the start of the semester. I have emails from before I filed the complaint where he praised my work. And I have 3 other students willing to say they witnessed him giving me a failing grade right after the dean's office contacted him about my complaint. Have you filed a formal complaint with the university? I tried. They're investigating, but it's been 2 months and nothing's happened. Meanwhile, this F is destroying my GPA, and I need to keep my scholarship. I thought about my document folder from 3 years ago, still saved on my laptop. The templates I created, the research I'd done into complaint procedures and evidence gathering. David, have you documented everything in a timeline format? With evidence cross-referenced? Sort of, but it's pretty scattered. Okay. Send me what you have. I'll help you organize it in a way that makes the pattern impossible to ignore. We spent 3 hours on the phone that night. I walked him through the same process I'd used, creating a comprehensive timeline, organizing evidence by category, identifying witnesses and getting written statements, researching university policies and external oversight bodies. I shared the templates I'd created, explained the importance of keeping emotions out of the documentation while letting the facts speak clearly. The key is making it so much work for them to ignore you that addressing the problem becomes easier, I explained. And showing that this isn't just about you, that there's a pattern of behavior that puts other students at risk. That's exactly what you did with Hendricks. Yeah. It worked because I wasn't just complaining. I was presenting a case. David paused. Can I ask you something personal? Do you ever regret it? Going after him like that? I thought about Tyler, about the stress of those months, about the way the whole experience had changed how I looked at institutions and authority. Sometimes I regret what it cost. But I've never regretted doing it. Because if I hadn't, he'd still be there, still doing the same things to other students. That's what I keep telling myself. We stayed in touch after that. I helped David refine his documentation and coached him through the process of escalating his complaint. He filed with the university's Title IX office, arguing that the professor's behavior constituted a hostile educational environment. He also filed with the state's Higher Education Oversight Board. And he found 2 more students who'd had similar experiences with the same professor but had been too intimidated to speak up. The university's tone changed once it became clear David had a case that could become a legal and public relations problem. The engineering department had met with him personally. An independent review of his failed project was conducted by a different professor, who determined the work clearly met the standards for a passing grade. David's grade was changed to a B+, and the professor was placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Last week, David texted me, "Professor announced his retirement today. Effective immediately. Thank you for everything. But here's the thing that's been occupying my thoughts since yesterday." After I helped David, I started getting more messages. A student from a different high school whose coach was retaliating against her for reporting safety violations. A guy whose resident advisor at his college had been abusing his authority. Someone whose academic advisor was steering minority students away from advanced courses. They'd all heard about what happened at Lincoln High, either through mutual connections or because the story had become one of those things that circulated in certain circles. And they all wanted to know the same thing: how do you fight back when the system seems designed to protect the people in power? I've been answering these messages when I can, sharing resources and strategies. But it's made me realize something. What happened with Principal Hendricks wasn't just about one vindictive administrator and one torn test. It was about a pattern that exists everywhere, in every institution, where people with authority sometimes abuse it, and those without power learn to stay quiet because speaking up seems impossible. I'm thinking about starting something more formal. Maybe a website with resources for students navigating complaints against teachers, administrators, or professors. Template letters, guides for documentation, information about legal rights and oversight processes. Maybe even a network of people who've successfully held institutions accountable who can mentor others going through similar situations. My roommate, Julia, thinks I should do it. You're basically already doing it informally, she pointed out last night when I was bouncing the idea off her. You might as well organize it properly. Plus, law schools love this kind of initiative. It's not about law school applications. I know. But it doesn't hurt that it's exactly the kind of thing top programs look for. She grinned. Sustained commitment to institutional reform through practical action? That's basically the dream personal statement. She's not wrong. I've been thinking about law school more seriously lately, specifically focusing on education law and civil rights. The work I've been doing, helping students like David, feels more meaningful than anything else I've encountered in college. It feels like the thing I'm supposed to be doing. I talked to my mother about it last weekend. She came to visit, and we went for coffee at that same cafe where I'm sitting now. I explained the situation with David, the other students reaching out, the idea for a resource website. That's a big undertaking, she said carefully. On top of your coursework and everything else. I know. But Mom, these students, they're where I was 3 years ago. They're scared and angry and they don't know what to do. And if I can help them, if I can share what I learned, maybe they don't have to figure it all out alone like I did. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Your father and I, we always knew you'd do something important. We just didn't know what form it would take. It's not that important. It's just helping a few people whose lives might be different because of you. That sounds pretty important to me. So I'm doing it. I've registered a domain name, studentadvocacytoolkit.org. I've started outlining the structure, gathering resources, writing guides based on my own experience and research. I've reached out to a couple of education law professors here at Hartwell who might be willing to review the content for accuracy. I don't know if it'll help many people or if anyone will even use it. But it feels necessary. Like I took this specific path through pain and bureaucracy and institutional resistance so I could turn around and offer a hand to the people still walking it. Tyler sent me a Facebook friend request a few months ago, and we've exchanged a few messages since then. He's thriving at Oberlin, studying music therapy, performing with multiple ensembles. He's found a place where his talent is valued instead of dismissed, where his choices belong to him. We'll probably never be close again, too much history, too much damage that can't be undone. But I'm glad he's okay. His father, from what I've heard through occasional Google searches, is still working at that private school in Connecticut. The articles about the Lincoln High investigation are still the top results when you search his name. I don't take pleasure in that, exactly, but I'm not sorry about it either. Consequences matter. Accountability matters. Marcus Reeves graduated from a 4-year university last spring with a degree in computer science. He got a job at a tech company in Seattle, making 6 figures right out of college. He sent me a LinkedIn message saying, "None of this happens if you don't speak up. Thank you for being braver than I could be." I don't think of it as bravery, though. I think of it as stubbornness. As refusing to accept that the way things are is the way things have to be. As believing that evidence and persistence and the truth can actually change outcomes, even when the odds seem impossible. I'm 20 years old. I have 2 more years of undergrad, then hopefully law school, then a career I can barely imagine yet. But I know what I want it to look like. I want to be the person who helps level the playing field for students who find themselves up against systems that should protect them but don't. The website launches next month. I've got 10 comprehensive guides written, a database of relevant policies for schools in 5 states, and a contact form where students can request specific resources or advice. It's not perfect, but it's a start. Small ripples again. But maybe this time, they'll reach a little farther. Update 2, 5 years after graduation. I'm writing this from my apartment in Washington, D.C., where I'm halfway through my 2nd year of law school at Georgetown. My evidence final is in 3 days, And I should absolutely be studying instead of writing a Reddit update, but something happened this morning that brought everything full circle, and I need to mark it somehow. The Student Advocacy Toolkit website I started in college grew beyond anything I expected. What began as a simple resource hub expanded into a registered nonprofit with a small team of volunteers, a network of education law professionals who provide pro bono consultations, and over 15,000 registered users across 43 states. We've helped students navigate hundreds of complaints against teachers, administrators, and professors. We've developed relationships with oversight bodies at the state and federal level. We've even testified before a congressional committee about the need for stronger student protections in public education. I'm proud of it. But I also know it exists because Principal Hendricks tore my SAT test in half, and that complexity, being grateful for the purpose that came from pain, is something I'm still learning to hold. This morning, I got a call from Mrs. Garrett, the school board member who first took my complaints seriously 5 years ago. We've stayed in touch over the years, exchanging occasional emails, her offering advice as I navigated college and law school applications. But we haven't spoken on the phone in at least a year. Maya, she said when I answered. I have news, and I wanted you to hear it directly from me. My first thought was that something bad had happened. Is everything okay? More than okay. The school board voted last night to establish a new position, a student ombudsman for the district. Someone whose entire job is to receive and investigate complaints about administrative conduct, provide advocacy for students navigating disciplinary issues, and ensure that power imbalances don't result in the kind of retaliation you experienced. I sat down on my couch, phone pressed to my ear. That's incredible. It's because of you. Your case, the investigation, the pattern you uncovered, it forced us to reckon with how our systems had failed. And frankly, the attention from the Student Advocacy Toolkit's advocacy work has kept pressure on districts across the country to implement better protections. We're one of the first to create this specific role, but others are following. Who did you hire? Mrs. Patterson. She retired from her counseling position last year but agreed to take this on. She said, and I'm quoting here, Maya Torres taught me that caution without courage is just cowardice. It's time I put that lesson into practice. I felt my throat tighten. Mrs. Patterson, who'd been too scared to help me directly 5 years ago, who'd apologized for her caution, was now taking on the institutional role of protecting students like me. She'll be perfect for it. She will. And Maya, I want you to know, the board specifically cited your case in the resolution creating this position. We acknowledge that our systems failed you, that you were forced to advocate for yourself in ways no 17-year-old should have to manage alone, and that we're implementing this change to ensure no student faces that situation again. After we hung up, I sat with my laptop open to my evidence notes but unable to focus. Instead, I pulled up old files, the 30-page document I'd compiled at 17, the photos of my torn test, the timeline that had become the blueprint for how I approached every advocacy case since then. I thought about the cost of that year. Tyler and I never really reconciled. We're connected on social media, and I see his posts occasionally. He's doing well, teaching piano to kids with disabilities, exactly what he always wanted. But we haven't spoken in years. That relationship was a casualty of his father's abuse of power, and there's no recovering it. I thought about the stress it put on my mother, who worked extra shifts to make sure we could afford any legal help we might need, even though we ended up not needing it. Who worried constantly that I'd face retaliation, that my college prospects would suffer, that I'd sacrifice my future to fight a battle I couldn't win. I thought about the months of investigation, of watching Principal Hendricks continue to walk the halls of Lincoln High while the wheels of bureaucracy ground slowly forward. Of wondering if I'd done the right thing, if it would matter, if anyone would believe me over someone with decades of institutional authority. But I also thought about the messages I've received through the toolkit. Hundreds of them now. Students who used our resources to successfully challenge unfair disciplinary actions. A girl who kept her scholarship because she knew how to document a professor's discrimination. A boy who reported his coach's abusive behavior and was believed because he had the language and evidence to make a compelling case. David Ochoa, who I helped 3 years ago, is graduating this spring with a degree in engineering. He's already accepted a job at a renewable energy company. He volunteers as a peer advocate at his university, helping other students navigate conflicts with faculty. He told me last month, "You taught me that institutions only change when we make it impossible for them to stay the same." The nonprofit has attracted attention from education reform organizations. I've been invited to speak at conferences, to present on panels, to contribute to policy proposals. A civil rights law firm in New York has already reached out about potential job opportunities after I graduate. The path forward is becoming clearer, shaped by that moment 5 years ago when Principal Hendricks thought he could destroy my future with a torn piece of paper. He didn't know he was creating exactly the person who would dedicate her life to making sure people like him can't do what he did. I've learned some things in these 5 years that I couldn't have understood at 17. I've learned that individual accountability, while important, isn't enough. Systems have to change. Policies have to be written, enforced, and regularly evaluated. Oversight has to be independent and accessible. Students need to know their rights and have support when those rights are violated. I've learned that power unchecked doesn't just corrupt, it perpetuates. Principal Hendricks wasn't an anomaly. He was a symptom of systems that protect administrators over students, that value institutional reputation over individual justice, that make it so difficult to speak up that most people don't even try. I've learned that change is slow and frustrating and requires more patience than I naturally possess. That for every victory, there are a dozen cases where students give up because the process is too hard, too long, too stacked against them. That the work of justice isn't a single dramatic confrontation, it's the accumulation of small, persistent efforts to build better systems. And I've learned that anger, while necessary to fuel action, can't sustain you long term. At some point, the anger has to transform into purpose, into building something constructive from the destruction you experienced. I think about Principal Hendricks sometimes. I don't hate him anymore, which surprises me. I understand him better now, the insecurity that must drive someone to exert such petty control over teenagers' lives, the fragility of the ego that can't tolerate being challenged, the way institutional power can become intoxicating when you have nothing else of value in your life. He's still working at that private school in Connecticut. I looked it up last year out of curiosity. The school's website lists him as Director of Student Affairs. I wonder if he's changed, if the investigation and forced resignation taught him anything, or if he simply found a new environment where his behavior is less scrutinized. Mostly, I hope he doesn't hurt anyone else. But I'm not naive enough to believe that hope guarantees anything. Marcus Reeves called me last month. He's doing really well. The tech job in Seattle led to rapid promotions, and he's now a senior developer working on accessibility features for educational software. I'm building tools that help students with disabilities get better access to learning materials, he told me. Feels like a full circle kind of thing. It's perfect for you. Yeah. And Maya, I wanted to tell you, I'm going back to school part-time. There's an online master's program in education policy, and I figured it's time I learned how these systems actually work. So I can help change them. Marcus, that's incredible. You inspired that. You showed me that what happened to us doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can be the beginning of a different one. We talked for over an hour, catching up on life, discussing the work the toolkit is doing, sharing ideas about policy reforms that could prevent students from experiencing what we experienced. By the end of the call, we'd made plans for Marcus to join the toolkit's advisory board, bringing his perspective as both a victim of administrative abuse and a professional in the education technology space. Sophie Chen reached out through LinkedIn a few weeks ago. She's in graduate school now, studying education administration. I kept thinking about what happened with Marcus, how my mom couldn't protect him without risking her position, she wrote. I want to be the kind of administrator who makes different choices. Who builds systems where protecting students doesn't require personal sacrifice. These connections, these ripples reaching forward into new spaces, this is what redemption looks like. Not revenge. Not public shaming or dramatic confrontations. Just people taking their pain and using it to build something better. I'm graduating from Georgetown next year. After that, I'm clerking for a federal judge for a year, then joining that civil rights firm in New York. My focus will be education law, specifically representing students and families in cases involving discrimination, retaliation, and due process violations. The work I've been doing with the toolkit has given me a preview of what that career will look like, and I want it more than I've wanted anything. My mother came to visit last weekend. We walked around Georgetown's campus, bundled against the February cold, and she said, "Do you remember when you were 12 and your father died, and you were so angry at the world?" I remember. I was worried that anger would consume you. That you'd carry it forever and let it poison everything. She stopped walking and turned to face me. But you didn't. You turned it into something good. Something that helps people. I'm so proud of who you've become. I thought about that torn test. About the cold fury I'd felt looking at the jagged edges where my answers had been ripped apart. About how that fury could have become bitterness, resentment, a worldview built on victimhood and cynicism. Instead, it became purpose. Principal Hendricks probably thought he was punishing me, I said to my mother. Teaching me a lesson about knowing my place, about accepting that people like him have power and people like me don't. And instead? Instead, he taught me that power isn't permanent. That institutions can change. That one person speaking up can start something bigger than themselves. I smiled. I should probably thank him. My mother laughed. Let's not go that far. But here's the truth, I'm grateful for who I've become because of what happened. Not grateful it happened, I'd still undo it if I could, would still spare my 17-year-old self that humiliation and pain. But grateful for the path it set me on, for the clarity it gave me about what matters, for the way it shaped my understanding of justice and advocacy and the long, difficult work of making systems better. Next month, the Toolkit is launching a new initiative specifically focused on helping students in private schools, where oversight is often minimal and power imbalances are even more pronounced. We're partnering with education law clinics at 3 law schools to provide direct representation in cases where students face retaliation or discrimination. The funding came through a grant from a foundation that focuses on education equity, and I get to help design the program's structure. It's funny, 5 years ago, I was a 17-year-old girl whose principal tore up her test. Now I'm a second-year law student building national programs to prevent other students from facing similar abuses of power. The transformation feels both impossible and inevitable. I'm not the same person who sat in that testing room and watched her future get torn in half. I'm stronger now, more strategic, better equipped to navigate institutional bureaucracy. But I'm also more aware of how fragile justice is, how much work it takes to maintain accountability, how easily systems slip back into protecting those with power over those without it. The student ombudsman position at my old district is just one step. We need them in every district, every college, every institution where authority and youth intersect. We need clear policies, independent oversight, accessible complaint procedures, and consequences that actually deter bad behavior. We need systems that make it impossible for someone like Principal Hendricks to destroy a student's opportunities because of personal spite. I'm going to spend my career building those systems. One case, one policy, one institution at a time. It's the work I was made for, even if I didn't know it until someone tried to break me and discovered I don't break, I adapt. Principal Hendricks tore my SAT test in half. I built a career from the pieces. Sometimes justice isn't about revenge or punishment, it's about ensuring the harm you experienced becomes impossible for others to endure. It's about taking the worst moments of your life and using them as blueprints for change. Institutional power will always exist, but it doesn't have to be absolute. One voice, armed with evidence and persistence, can ripple outward until entire systems shift. The people who try to break us often don't realize they're simply forging us into something stronger, something capable of dismantling the very structures they used as weapons. And that's the truest victory, not just surviving what was meant to destroy you, but building a world where that destruction can't happen again.